Hi, I'm Joshua Jones, Director at Studio Zeren. I'm pleased to have the opportunity to share with you some digital tools that we leverage to communicate internally and also with clients. I feel like I always have the most fun designing when I'm drawing, and so whether I'm in my hand sketchbook or my iPad sketchbook, I always find myself drawing conclusions. That really helped to inspire the idea to share this walkthrough for concept sketching and design. So here you see I'm using an iPad Pro and an Apple Pencil. I usually make sure that at least my iPad is fully charged, and the Apple Pencil, I'll usually charge it up a little bit before I start, and then I just need to open Morpholio Trace. Just as a side note, I'm using my brush palette that's set up with sequential line weight, so this will help you move a little bit faster as you sketch. Let's break down this sketch that we drew for the Pelican House and see how it's made. We'll start off with some simple line work. I once had an architecture professor that said that the section is a DNA of a project, so I typically start off drawing in section. You'll see here that I'm using regulating lines to begin to expand via proportional geometry, and then I'm also building my plan and relationship at the same time. I knew when I started this that I was going to do a composite drawing, and it's not just for graphic impact, but it's so that I can begin to understand and question those understandings visually as I'm going through and designing at least the form and exploring different spatial relationships within this project. It's certainly not a requirement, but as you can tell, I use various colors within my sketching process. My more defined and more solid lines are going to typically be either black or gray or even white, depending on the color of my canvas. Each one of my drawings is a visual record of thinking, and so you can tell at this point I start to expand to the site, to horizon, to begin to think about sky and relationships, between the sky, topography, and the building itself. And so I begin to just give myself some time to think and usually draw in a certain level of entourage or detail and look at ways to begin to frame not just the graphic, but my approach to how I'm presenting the idea. I build up the drawings layer by layer so that I can turn ideas on and off. And so let's zoom out and get a screen recording view as we begin to bring in the site and add some context to this design exploration. At this point, you'll see me bring in some site imagery with some contour lines and begin to scale, rotate, shift, and position this in relation to the sketch that I already created. This is me effectively, in my mind, making a 2D model of the site and the design in my head, and then reconciling the specific orientations based on either solar orientation, which would be more sustainable, or based on how it could fit on the site, or at this point I'm just exploring the relationship between the designed building in this case and the site. The next steps are not just graphic, but I'm actually looking to create another layer that goes on top of that and integrate the form of the building into the site information that I have. So I begin to outline the specific borders, and again, I'm not looking at this as a design development or construction document exercise, but it's more of trying to capture the limits, the boundary edges, the more abstract elements of the project that begin to give it some definition, and then looking to include that in a graphic presentation of an idea. Now, it's time to add in the details. One of my favorite art teachers shared a tip with me. In terms of drawing, when you're adding detail, add enough detail, line work, information, or suggestion for a person's mind to complete the composition. It doesn't require capturing everything, every bit of line, especially when you're tracing the site contour and beginning to integrate the ideas about site and horizon and the building and the form and its relationship to the ground and land and sky. But it certainly helps to have somebody else who's going to look at the image begin to understand what you're trying to imply. When working to try to define a boundary edge, I highly recommend using Morpholio's Super Ruler tool. That way you can have the ruler enabled and not necessarily have to have the ruler in place in order to draw a straight line. And you can always in the settings toggle off the angle snap, and that way you can draw a straight line in any direction. It becomes really quick and easy to get nice crisp edges and boundaries and contours. Specifically contour lines as opposed to contours in terms of the site plan. This process can be a little bit repetitive of trying to add the details, but I find it really fun and it gives me time to think. So I'll turn off the background and just see where I am, and then make sure that the graphic is going in the direction that I originally intended. A lot of times this target changes over the course of working on the image, but either way I can get to see the finish line, if you will, as I'm going through this process. And so from this point on, it'll just be a matter of adding in little details and erasing and changing other parts of the background image. And by erasing, I mean adding white and then doing overlays and changing my layer settings. One habit I highly recommend is working from the background to the foreground in a specific graphic. And so here I'm using the fill tool to begin to set my, if you will, figure ground relationship in this image. And so you'll see that I'm using the sky, and I usually select my colors initially, but I'm going to play around with this and see what I like. I set a diagrammatic color for the sky and try to repeat that for things that either reflect the sky or open to the sky or something like that. So again, I'm capturing a record of design decisions, even when I select this kind of color blocks or absence of color or white or whatever it is. It's all going towards the design process. As you can tell, this process is more freeform and cyclical than anything. It's not one direction to the finish line of a drawing, but I'm thinking and making as I go. And so finally, I'm going to add some finishing touches here. I wanted to put the site plan with some contours under my drawing and kind of do an overlay. And so in order to do that, I needed to, specifically with trace, begin to white out, if you will, the areas of the image that I don't want to see and put it in a layer far in the background of all the other things that are kind of multiplied or superimposed on top. This can take some time and get a little bit involved, but what we're going to do is there's a link in the description to be able to have access to a digital download of our trace file, and you'll be able to flip through the layers and see what we did specifically to get the final graphic image. So if you enjoy this in-depth walkthrough of our process in concept sketching, please like and subscribe, and you can reach out to us on any of our social platforms.